Welcome, dear viewers. For more exclusive, thrilling stories every week, join our membership. Sit back, relax, and sip your coffee. Enjoy. The blood on the notebook's cover had dried to a rusty brown, flaking at the edges where Sheriff Wilkins's thumb had worn it away. It wasn't the first blood-stained item I'd been handed in my 12 years with the FBI, but something about the spiral-bound composition book made my stomach clench. This was clutched in Deputy Harmon's hand when we found him, Sheriff Wilkins said, his weathered face a mask of exhaustion. 3 days ago, out by Slaughterville Road. He pinched the bridge of his nose. 4th body in 6 weeks. I'm Special Agent Marcus Chin. 3 days ago, I was in my apartment in Oklahoma City, enjoying a rare weekend off with nothing more dramatic than deciding between Thai or pizza delivery. Now, I was standing in the small, fluorescent-lit sheriff's office in Noble, Oklahoma, population 6,700, wondering how the hell I'd missed hearing about 4 law enforcement officers going missing. Why wasn't the Bureau notified sooner? I asked, careful to keep accusation out of my voice. Wilkins's eyes darted to the notebook, then away. Thought we could handle it ourselves. Noble's always handled its own problems. The office around us looked like it belonged to a different era. Wood paneling, ancient filing cabinets, a coffee maker that had probably been brewing the same pot since morning. A map of McLean County dominated one wall, red pins marking locations I assumed were related to the case. 3 were clustered around Slaughterville Road, the 4th somewhere near Lake Thunderbird. Start from the beginning, I said, sliding into a chair across from his desk. Wilkins sank heavily into his own seat. First was State Trooper Ellis, found by hikers up at the lake. Then Deputy Cruz out near the old Henderson place, Officer Palmer from Norman PD a week later, and now Harmon. He stared at his hands. All arranged the same way. Arranged? Like posed, arms and legs bent at strange angles. He swallowed. Their faces were wrong, like someone tried to reshape them, with their hands. I'd seen my share of ritualistic killings, but something in Wilkins's voice told me this was different. And the notebook? Harmon was writing in it, said it might help him stay alive. A bitter laugh escaped him. Fat lot of good it did. I flipped open the notebook, careful of the brittle, blood-crusted pages. The first entry was dated 6 weeks ago, the handwriting neat and precise. Rules for surviving the thing in Noble. 1. Never investigate alone, but never bring more than one partner. 2. Always be back in town before sunset. 3. If you hear your name called in the woods, do not answer. 4. If you see someone you know on a rural road, do not acknowledge them unless they speak first. 5. Keep something iron on your person at all times. 6. Never turn your back on Lake Thunderbird after dark. 7. If you smell burning hair, leave immediately. Beneath these, written in a different hand with a heavier press, was a final rule. 8. It knows your face now. I looked up at Wilkins. You believe this? He shrugged, not meeting my eyes. I grew up here. There's always been stories. What kind of stories? About things that ain't quite right in the woods. Things that can wear a person's skin. He fidgeted with his wedding band. My grandma was Cherokee. She called them skinwalkers. I wanted to dismiss it. I really did. But I'd been raised by a mother who burned spirit money for our ancestors and never turned down an offering from a temple, no matter how small the village we visited in China. Some things you don't question, even with an Ivy League education and an FBI badge. Where am I staying? I asked instead. Motel 6 off I-35. Nothing fancy, but it's clean. As I tucked the notebook into my jacket pocket, my phone buzzed. A text from my supervisor. "Keep me posted. Director wants daily updates." Great. This case already had the attention of the top brass. "One more thing," Wilkins said as I stood to leave. "Nobody in this town will talk to you after dark. Don't take it personal." I nodded, not yet understanding the weight of what I was stepping into. "And Agent Chen?" Wilkins called as I reached the door. "If you hear something scratching at your motel room door tonight, don't open it, no matter who they say they are." The Motel 6 was exactly what you'd expect. Clean enough, but soul-crushingly generic. My room faced the highway, the constant hum of passing trucks providing a soundtrack as I spread crime scene photos across the thin polyester bedspread. 4 dead officers. 4 crime scenes with no prints, no DNA, no trace evidence. Just bodies arranged in positions that defied natural anatomy and faces. I picked up a photo of Deputy Cruz. His face looked like clay that had been worked by inexperienced hands. Features in approximately the right places but wrong in ways that made my skin crawl. I pinned the photos to the wall and opened my laptop. The autopsy reports were equally baffling. No cause of death identified. Bodies showed evidence of being manipulated post-mortem, but the ME noted unusual elasticity of facial tissue and unexplained malleability of joints, like their bodies had become something other than human before they died. My phone rang. Sheriff Wilkins. "Found you a local guide," he said without preamble. "Jamie Blackfox. Used to work search and rescue before budget cuts. Knows every inch of these woods. Meeting you at Sonic on Main Street at 7 tomorrow." Black Fox. Native? Choctaw and Cherokee. If anyone can help you understand what's happening, it's Jamie. I hung up and returned to Harmon's notebook. After the list of rules came journal entries, increasingly frantic as the weeks progressed. May 12th, Ellis's body was found positioned like a broken marionette. ME says no signs of struggle. How does a state trooper not fight back? May 16th. Cruz went missing yesterday. Found him this morning. His face, Jesus Christ, like someone tried to wear it. May 18. I heard my name in the woods today. Sounded like Ellis. Remembered the stories my grandfather told me. Don't answer no matter what. Clutched my great-grandfather's railroad spike until my palm bled. May 21st. Palmer's gone. Norman PD is blaming us, like we're not doing everything we can. May 25th. There's something watching me from the woods behind my house. It stands on 2 legs but moves wrong, like its joints bend in too many places. May 26th. It called my wife's name tonight, used my voice, had to physically restrain her from opening the door. May 29th. Sheriff's bringing in the FBI. Too late for us, maybe not for them. May 30th. I know what it is now. Nahullo, Skinwalker. It takes your face, then it takes your soul. The final entry was dated the day before he died, May 31st. It knows I know. Followed me home, scratched at my windows all night. If I don't make it, whoever reads this, follow the rules. They're the only chance you have. I rubbed my eyes. 4 dead men. A notebook full of superstition. The rational part of my brain wanted to dismiss this as the ramblings of frightened men in over their heads, maybe facing a particularly sadistic serial killer. But those crime scene photos. A sharp rap at my door made me jump. Through the peephole, I saw a middle-aged woman in a Motel 6 uniform, holding fresh towels. "Housekeeping," she called. I cracked the door. "I'm fine, thanks." She peered past me at the crime scene photos. Her eyes widened. "You're the FBI man." I nodded. She lowered her voice. You're looking for it, aren't you? The thing that got those officers. Do you know something about the case? She glanced nervously toward the parking lot. The sun was setting, painting the sky in violent reds and oranges. Not after dark, she whispered. Come to Pumpkin's Diner tomorrow morning. Ask for Marlene. Before I could respond, she hurried away, the sound of her practical shoes echoing down the concrete walkway. I closed the door, double-checking the deadbolt and sliding the security chain into place. As darkness fell completely, the motel seemed to grow quieter, the highway traffic fitting to occasional rumbles. My phone buzzed with an incoming text. Unknown number. Welcome to Noble, Agent Chen. Looking forward to meeting you. I texted back. Who is this? 3 dots appeared, disappeared, appeared again. Finally, Jamie Blackfox. Sheriff gave me your number. Don't go out tonight. Another text followed immediately. And if you hear anything, remember rule number 3. I reread the rules in the notebook. Rule number 3. If you hear your name called in the woods, do not answer. But I wasn't in the woods. I was in a motel room just off Interstate 35, with bright lights and civilization all around. As if reading my thoughts, a final text came through. The thing about woods is they're always closer than you think. I drew the cheap curtains closed and turned on every light in the room. Outside, a dog, or something, howled in the distance. I tried to focus on the case files, but the words swam before my eyes, rearranging themselves like the twisted limbs in the photos. Around midnight, I dozed off in the chair, case files in my lap. I jerked awake to complete darkness. Power outage? My phone showed 3:17 a.m. That's when I heard it. My name, spoken softly from somewhere outside my window. Marcus. It was my mother's voice, impossibly far from her home in San Francisco. Marcus, help me. Please. I clenched my fists, heart hammering. Rule number 3. Don't answer. I know you're awake, Marcus. The voice changed, becoming Sheriff Wilkins's drawl. Just need to talk to you about the case. I reached for my gun, hands shaking. A scratching sound started at my door, gentle at first, then more insistent. Scritch, scritch, scritch. Agent Chen? Now it was a woman's voice. Housekeeping. Sorry to bother you so late. The scratching grew louder, more desperate. I sat frozen in the dark, gun in hand, as whatever was outside my door spent the next hour calling to me in the voices of everyone I had spoken to that day. I didn't answer. I didn't open the door. When dawn broke, the parking lot was empty except for my rental car and the maintenance truck. No evidence of anything scratching at my door. But on the ground outside my room, pressed into the concrete as if by enormous weight, a perfect outline of a human hand with fingers bent at impossible angles. Pumpkin's Diner sat on Main Street, a time capsule from the 1950s with chrome trim and red vinyl booths. At 6:30 a.m., it was already half full with farmers and oil field workers fueling up before their day. Conversations hushed when I walked in, my suit marking me as an outsider as clearly as if I'd been wearing a sign. I slid into a booth and ordered coffee from a waitress whose name tag read Tammy. "Is Marlene here?" I asked. Tammy's smile tightened. "She's in the back. I'll tell her you're asking." While I waited, I checked my phone. 3 missed calls from my supervisor and an email requesting an update. What could I possibly say? Following a lead from a blood-stained notebook detailing supernatural rules for survival. P.S. Something tried to trick me into opening my door last night by mimicking human voices. That would go over well. A woman in her 50s slid into the booth across from me. Her graying hair was pulled back in a neat bun, and her eyes, deep brown and shrewd, studied me carefully. Agent Chen. She didn't frame it as a question. I'm Marlene Tsosi. Thank you for meeting me, Miss Tsosi. Marlene's fine. She glanced around the diner, then lowered her voice. What did you hear last night? The question caught me off guard. Excuse me? At the motel, after dark, what did it sound like? I hesitated, waiting how much to reveal. Voices, scratching at my door. She nodded as if this confirmed something. Whose voices? People I'd met yesterday, and my mother's. Marlene's face softened slightly. It always uses the voices of people you care about, or people you trust. She pushed up her sleeve, revealing a jagged scar running from wrist to elbow. 15 years ago, I heard my daughter calling for help. Opened my back door without thinking. What happened? It wasn't my daughter. Her voice was flat. My husband shot it before it could finish the job. The bullet passed straight through like it was made of smoke, but it ran off. What was it? The Dine, Nadaho, call it a Yinaud Lushi. Skinwalker. The Choctaw have stories of Naholo. Charity call them raven mockers. Different names, same evil. She stared into her coffee. It mimics. It steals. It learns. I thought of the crime scene photos, the twisted bodies, the faces that looked molded by inhuman hands. Why law enforcement officers? They were hunting it, just like you. She shook her head. Sheriff Wilkins should have warned you better. He gave me the notebook. Not enough. Noble's been dealing with this thing for generations. Comes in cycles. Every few decades it gets hungry again. For what? Identities. Lives. She met my eyes. Faces. The diner door jingled, and Marlene stiffened. A tall, lean figure walked in, scanning the room before spotting us. Dark hair pulled back in a ponytail, copper skin, and eyes so dark they appeared black. Mid-30s, wearing hiking boots, Carhartt pants, and a faded Oklahoma State University sweatshirt. Jamie, Marlene acknowledged as the newcomer approached. Miss Tsosi. Jamie Blackfox nodded, then turned to me. Agent Chen. Sheriff said you need someone who knows the backcountry? Jamie's handshake was firm, calloused. Up close, I noticed a scar bisecting the left eyebrow and another along the jawline. Marlene's been filling me in on local folklore, I said carefully. Jamie slid into the booth beside Marlene. Not folklore if it's killing people. Tammy brought more coffee without being asked. Jamie took a sip, then fixed me with an intense stare. You followed the rules last night. It wasn't a question, but I nodded. Good. You might survive this. Jamie pulled out a topographical map of the area and spread it across the table. 4 deaths, all in these areas. 4 X's marked locations that roughly matched the pins I'd seen in Wilkins's office. What are we looking for exactly? I asked. Not what. Who? Jamie tapped the map near Lake Thunderbird. 6 weeks ago, a hiker went missing. Timothy Grayson, grad student from OU. His campsite was found abandoned, but no body. You think he's connected? I think he's the first victim. Or... Jamie hesitated. I think something took his identity, started wearing him, learning how to be human. In my years with the FBI, I'd heard a lot of theories about serial killers, but this was new territory. My skepticism must have shown on my face. You don't have to believe, Jamie said. Just follow the rules. And respect what you don't understand, Marlene added. Jamie folded the map. We need to visit each crime scene. Maybe we can find what the others missed. Sheriff's already processed those scenes, I pointed out. Sheriff's afraid to look too closely, Jamie countered. And his deputies are too spooked to be thorough. No offense to the dead, but they weren't following all the rules. I thought of Harmon's notebook. Which rules did they break? Alice went to the lake alone. Cruz investigated after sunset. Palmer forgot his iron. And Harmon. Jamie's expression darkened. Harmon looked back. At what? At whatever was following him. The diner had grown quieter, I realized. The other patrons were studiously avoiding looking in our direction. We should go, Marlene said, placing cash on the table for her coffee. People get nervous when we talk about it openly. As we stood to leave, I noticed an elderly man watching us from the counter. When our eyes met, he deliberately turned his coffee cup upside down, placed a salt shaker beside it, and nodded to me. What was that about? I asked as we exited. Old protection ritual, Jamie explained. He's wishing us safety. Outside, the morning sun did little to dispel my unease. Jamie led us to a mud-spattered Ford F-150. We'll take my truck. Where are you staying, Agent Chen? Motel 6. Not anymore, Marlene cut in. You're staying with me. My house has proper protections. Before I could protest, Jamie nodded in agreement. She's right. Motel's not safe. It knows you're there now. There's that word again. It. What exactly is this thing supposed to be? Jamie started the truck. Legend says skinwalkers were once medicine people who chose evil ways, gained power by breaking taboos. But this... A shadow crossed Jamie's face. This is older, hungrier. We drove in silence through Noble's small downtown, past the Dollar General and the Sonic where I was supposed to have originally met Jamie. The town quickly gave way to scattered houses, then open farmland. First stop is the Henderson place, Jamie said, where they found Deputy Cruz. Marlene touched a small leather pouch hanging around her neck. You have iron on you, Agent Chen? I shook my head. She reached into her purse and pulled out a railroad spike, similar to the one Harmon had mentioned in his notes. It was old, heavy, the metal dark with age. Keep this with you, always. I took it, feeling foolish but unwilling to dismiss their concerns outright. Thanks. One more thing, Jamie said as we turned onto a gravel road that stretched toward distant trees. If you see anything strange today, anything at all, tell us immediately. Don't try to rationalize it away. Like what? People who shouldn't be there. Animals acting wrong. Your own reflection moving independently. Jamie's knuckles whitened on the steering wheel. And if you smell burning hair, we run. Immediately. Rule number 7 from the notebook. The Henderson place turned out to be an abandoned farmhouse, roof partially collapsed, surrounded by scrubby fields and encroaching forest. Yellow police tape fluttered from a nearby copse of trees. As we pulled up, I noticed something odd. Dozens of ravens perched silently on the roof and in the surrounding trees, all watching our truck. That normal? I asked, nodding toward the birds. Marlene and Jamie exchanged glances. No, Jamie said quietly. That's not normal at all. The ravens remained perfectly still, not a single caw or ruffle of feathers breaking the eerie silence as we stepped out of the truck. Welcome to rural Oklahoma, where even the wildlife seemed to be following some unwritten rules I didn't yet understand. The silence around the Henderson place was absolute. No bird calls, no insects buzzing, not even the whisper of wind through the tall grass. Just the crunch of our boots on gravel and the watchful eyes of those motionless ravens. Keep the spike in your dominant hand, Jamie advised quietly as we approached the police tape. And stay between us. I felt ridiculous clutching a railroad spike, but something about those birds, their unnatural stillness, their focused attention, kept me from protesting. Cruz's body was found there. Jamie pointed to a small clearing visible through the trees. According to the report, positioned like a broken doll. The crime scene had been processed weeks ago, but yellow evidence markers still dotted the area, forgotten or deliberately left behind. The ground where the body had lain was discolored, not with blood, but with a strange, ashy residue. I crouched to examine it, careful not to touch. "That wasn't in the report," I said. "No," Jamie agreed. "It wouldn't be." Marlene stood at the edge of the clearing, eyes scanning the tree line. "We're being watched." I instinctively reached for my gun, but Jamie shook their head. "Won't help." The ashy substance seemed to shimmer slightly in the morning light. I pulled out my phone to take photos. "Cruz was investigating reports of trespassing," I said, recalling the case file. "The Henderson family hasn't lived here for years, but neighbors reported seeing lights in the windows at night. People have been avoiding this place since I was a kid," Marlene said. "Bad energy." I moved toward where Cruz's head had been, according to the crime scene photos. There, partially obscured by leaves, was something I hadn't expected. A small, crude doll made of twisted twigs and what looked like human hair. "Jamie?" I called softly. "What's this?" Jamie approached, then froze. "Don't touch it." I hadn't planned to. "Is it related?" "Maybe." Jamie's voice was tight. "We need to go, now." "But we just got here." "Now, Agent Chen." The urgency in Jamie's tone brooked no argument. As we turned to leave, a twig snapped in the woods beyond the clearing. All the ravens took flight simultaneously, a black cloud against the blue sky, but they made no sound as they dispersed. We hurried back to the truck. Only when we were inside with the doors locked did Jamie speak again. "That doll wasn't there before." "You've been here before?" I asked. "Last week, with Sheriff Wilkins." Jamie started the engine. That clearing was empty except for the evidence markers. "So someone placed it there recently," I reasoned. "Maybe kids messing around?" Jamie's laugh was hollow. "Kids don't come within a mile of this place." "What was it?" I pressed. "A fetish," Marlene said from the back seat. "A way to mark territory. Or a lure," Jamie added grimly, accelerating down the gravel road faster than was strictly safe. I turned to look behind us. Nothing followed, but the skin on the back of my neck prickled all the same. "Where to next?" I asked, trying to maintain some semblance of professional detachment. "Lake Thunderbird, where they found Trooper Ellis." Jamie checked the rearview mirror repeatedly. "But first, we need to make a stop." That stop turned out to be a small, weathered house on the outskirts of town. A hand-painted sign beside the door read, "Paul Eagle Feather, Traditional Medicine." "Wait in the truck," Jamie said. Through the windshield, I watched Jamie knock on the door and speak briefly with an elderly man who appeared, his long gray hair in braids. The man disappeared inside, then returned with a small leather pouch which he handed to Jamie. "Protection," Jamie explained upon returning to the truck. "Paul's family has been keeping watch over this area for generations." Jamie handed me the pouch. Inside were herbs that smelled of sage and cedar, along with what looked like small bones. "Wear it," Jamie instructed. I slipped it over my head, feeling increasingly like I'd stumbled into a world with rules I couldn't begin to comprehend. The practical, by-the-book FBI agent in me wanted to dismiss all of this as superstition, but after what I'd seen and heard last night. "Tell me about Timothy Grayson," I said as we headed toward the lake. Jamie's eyes remained fixed on the road. 24 years old. Anthropology PhD student researching local folklore. Camping alone near Lake Thunderbird. His girlfriend reported him missing when he didn't check in for 3 days. And no body was ever found? Just his tent, sleeping bag, research notes, and blood. Jamie's hands tightened on the wheel. But not enough for someone to have died there. You think whatever took him is what's killing the officers? I think whatever took him became him. For a while. Jamie glanced at me. Then it needed new identities. Faces, Marlene added softly from the back seat. We drove through the gates of Lake Thunderbird State Park. The lake itself, a vast blue expanse visible through the trees. In summer, this place would be bustling with families picnicking and swimming. But today, a weekday in early June, it was relatively quiet. Jamie parked near a trailhead. Ellis's body was found about half a mile in. Official reports say he was investigating poachers. That night, I asked, remembering rule number 2, always be back in town before sunset. That's right, Marlene confirmed. Alone. Rules number 1 and number 2 broken. We hiked in silence, Jamie leading the way along a narrow trail that wound through oak and hickory trees. The sunlight filtering through the leaves cast dappled shadows that seemed to move in my peripheral vision. Here, Jamie said eventually, stopping in a small clearing overlooking the lake. Unlike the Henderson place, there was no police tape here, no evidence markers, just a peaceful lakeside view that belied the horror that had occurred. They found him posed on his knees. Jamie indicated a spot near the water's edge. Face reworked, looking at the lake. I remembered rule number 6. Never turn your back on Lake Thunderbird after dark. What was he looking at? No one knows. Jamie surveyed the tranquil water. But whatever it was, it saw him too. I approached the spot where Ellis's body had been discovered. The ground showed no sign of disturbance now. Grass and wild flowers growing undisturbed. This is where it started, Jamie said. After Grayson disappeared. First, people reported seeing him around the lake at odd hours. Then he was spotted in town, but acting strange. Not speaking. Just watching. Then Ellis came to investigate. I continued the narrative. And became the next victim. Marlene finished. Something glinted among the grass near the water. I crouched down, pushing aside the vegetation to find a watch with a cracked face. Its hands stopped at 9:47. That wasn't in the evidence log, I said, pulling a pen from my pocket to lift it without touching. Jamie leaned in to look. That's Ellis's watch. I recognize it. His wife gave it to him for their anniversary. How do you know that? Small town, Jamie shrugged. Everyone knows everyone. I bagged the watch carefully. Either the crime scene team missed this, or it wasn't here before, Marlene said, echoing our experience at the Henderson place. It's leaving things for us to find, Jamie said quietly. Playing with us. A soft splash from the lake drew our attention. Ripples spread across the otherwise still water, as if something had surfaced briefly, then submerged. We should go, Marlene said, her voice tight. Now. As we hurried back along the trail, I couldn't shake the feeling we were being herded. First the doll, now the watch, breadcrumbs leading us somewhere. We're missing something, I said once we were back in the truck. These aren't random kills. There's a pattern. Of course there is. Jamie started the engine. It's hunting, learning. Each victim teaches it something new. What did it learn from Ellis? Patience, Marlene suggested. How to wait, to watch. From Cruz. How law enforcement thinks, investigates. Jamie pulled onto the main road. It's studying us while we study it. A chill ran through me as I considered the implications. And from Harmon and Palmer? Jamie's expression darkened. How to get close. how to be trusted. We drove in silence for several minutes, the weight of this realization settling over us. If Jamie and Marlene were right, if this thing was learning, adapting, then each encounter made it more dangerous. "We need to see where Palmer and Harmon were found," I said. Jamie shook their head. "Not today. Sun sets in a few hours. We need to be off the roads by then." Rule number 2. I checked my watch. 2:17 p.m. "We have time." "No." Marlene was firm. "We don't know how close it is. It knows we're looking for it now." "How could it know that? The doll? The watch?" Jamie's eyes continuously checked the mirrors. "It's watching us." As if to punctuate this statement, my phone buzzed with a text. "Unknown number. Found something you need to see. Meet me at the old fire tower off Highway 9. Sheriff Wilkins." I showed the text to Jamie, who immediately pulled over. "Did Wilkins mention meeting you today?" "No," I admitted. "Call him," Marlene urged. "Now." I dialed the sheriff's office. The receptionist answered. "This is Agent Chin. I need to speak with Sheriff Wilkins immediately." "I'm sorry, Agent Chin. The sheriff left an hour ago for Oklahoma City, meeting with the State Bureau of Investigation. He won't be back until tomorrow." My blood ran cold. I ended the call and relayed the information. "It's trying to separate us," Jamie said, knuckles white on the steering wheel. "Get you alone." "Like it did with the others," Marlene added. Another text came through. "Urgent. Need your help. Can't talk on phone. Wilkins." "What do we do?" I asked, hating the tremor in my voice. "We go to my place," Marlene said decisively. "It's protected. We regroup, make a plan for tomorrow." Jamie nodded in agreement and pulled back onto the road, this time driving even faster. The railroad spike felt heavy in my pocket as I watched the rural landscape blur past the window. The rules that had seemed so strange yesterday now felt like a lifeline. I thought of the 4 dead men, each one breaking a rule before they died. My phone buzzed a third time. I almost didn't look, but professional habit won out. This time the text contained a photo. My motel room, the door slightly ajar, and reflected in the bathroom mirror, visible through the open door, my own face smiling at the camera. But I wasn't there. I was here in Jamie's truck, miles away. "Jamie," I whispered, showing the phone. "I think we have a problem." "Don't look at it," Marlene snapped, reaching forward to knock the phone from my hand. "Never look at its images. That's how it gets in." Too late, I thought. The image of my own smiling face, a face that wasn't mine anymore, burning behind my eyelids all the way to Marlene's house. Marlene's house sat at the end of a long dirt driveway, surrounded by ancient oak trees. It was a single-story ranch-style home with a wide porch and wind chimes hanging from the eaves. As we approached, I noticed small bundles of herbs tied above each window and doorway. "Home sweet home," Marlene said as Jamie parked. "It's not much, but it's safe." The sky was darkening rapidly, not just from the approaching sunset, but from storm clouds gathering on the horizon. Thunder rumbled in the distance. "Perfect," Jamie muttered. "Just what we need." Inside, the house was warm and lived in. Family photos covered one wall. Marlene with a younger woman I assumed was her daughter, an older man who must have been her husband, various children and relatives at different life stages. Marlene immediately busied herself closing curtains and checking locks. Jamie disappeared into the kitchen and returned with 3 bottles of water, handing one to me. "Drink," Jamie instructed. "You're probably dehydrated and don't realize it." I obeyed, suddenly aware of how dry my throat was. My mind kept returning to that photo on my phone, my face smiling in a place I hadn't been. How is this possible? I asked, struggling to reconcile what I'd seen with what I knew about the world. How can something look exactly like me when I'm not there? Jamie and Marlene exchanged glances. It doesn't just mimic appearances, Janie explained, sitting across from me at Marlene's dining table. It absorbs identity, memories, mannerisms. The more it interacts with someone, the more perfect the copy. But it's never been around me enough to... It was outside your door all night, Marlene reminded me. Listening, learning your voice. And it's been watching you, Jamie added. Since you arrived. Lightning flashed outside, followed by a clap of thunder that rattled the windows. Marlene moved to the kitchen and returned with 3 small glasses and a bottle of amber liquid. Wild turkey, she said, pouring a finger into each glass. Medicinal purposes. I downed mine gratefully, the bourbon burning a path to my stomach. I need to call my supervisor, I said, reaching for my phone before remembering Marlene had knocked it from my hand in the truck. Where's my phone? You don't want it back, Jamie said firmly. Not after what came through on it. I have a landline, Marlene offered, gesturing to an ancient cordless phone on the wall. But think carefully about what you'll say. She was right. What can I possibly report? 4 officers dead, bodies manipulated by what locals believe is a skinwalker. P.S. It's already copying my appearance. Tomorrow, I decided. I'll update the Bureau tomorrow when we have more concrete evidence. The skeptical FBI agent I'd been just 24 hours ago would have scoffed at this decision, but that agent hadn't seen what I'd seen today. Good call, Jamie nodded. We need a plan first. Marlene refilled our glasses. You're both staying here tonight. Extra rooms upstairs. After dark is when it's strongest. We need to understand its pattern, I said, trying to impose some investigative structure on the situation. All 4 victims were law enforcement. All were investigating something related to this entity. All broke at least one rule. And all were found with their faces altered, Jamie added grimly. But why? What does it want with their faces? Marlene stared into her glass. Identity. To be them. To wear them. Lightning illuminated the room again, and in that flash, I could have sworn I saw additional shadows on the wall. Shadows that didn't match our positions. The rules, I said, pulling out Harmon's notebook. They're survival tactics, right? Ways to avoid becoming a victim? Jamie nodded. Passed down through generations. Different cultures in this area have their own versions, but they all recognize the same threat. I reviewed the list again. 1. Never investigate alone, but never bring more than 1 partner. 2. Always be back in town before sunset. 3. If you hear your name called in the woods, do not answer. 4. If you see someone you know on a rural road, do not acknowledge them unless they speak first. 5. Keep something iron on your person at all times. 6. Never turn your back on Lake Thunderbird after dark. 7. If you smell burning hair, leave immediately. 8. It knows your face now. These first 7 make sense as precautions, I said. But the 8th, that's different. That's not a rule. It's a warning. Or a death sentence, Jamie said quietly. The lights flickered as another roll of thunder shook the house. Generator will kick in if the power goes, Marlene assured us, but there was tension in her voice. How do you kill it? I asked bluntly. The question hung in the air between us. No one knows for sure, Jamie finally answered. Some say fire. Others say you have to trap it between worlds, catch it in the middle of changing forms. The old stories say it can't be killed, Marlene added. Only contained or driven away. My husband shot one, and it ran, but it didn't die. There must be something, I insisted. Everything has a weakness. Jamie leaned forward. There's a theory. If it takes someone's identity, their face, and that person dies while it's wearing them. Jamie trailed off. Then what? I prompted. Then maybe it dies too. Or at least, that part of it dies. But no one's ever tested this theory and lived to report back. The implications sank in. If this thing was already wearing my face, mimicking me. We need to find it, I said, a plan forming. Draw it out somehow. That's suicide, Marlene objected. Not if we're prepared. Not if we follow the rules. The lights went out completely, plunging us into darkness. For a long moment, we sat in silence, waiting for the generator to kick in. It didn't. Marlene? Jamie's voice came from across the table. Generator? Should have started automatically, she replied, her voice tight with concern. Stay here. I heard her chair scrape back, followed by fumbling sounds and a beam of light as she activated a flashlight. I'll check the circuit breaker, she said. Jamie, there are more flashlights in the kitchen drawer. She moved toward the back of the house, the beam of light receding. Don't split up, I called after her, rule number 1 flashing in my mind. It's fine, Jamie assured me. The house is protected. I wasn't convinced, but before I could argue further, a piercing scream came from the direction Marlene had gone. Jamie was on their feet instantly. Stay here. No! I grabbed Jamie's arm. Rule 1. We stick together. Jamie hesitated, then nodded. Together, we moved toward the back of the house, my hand gripping the railroad spike so hard my knuckles hurt. Marlene? Jamie called, voice steady despite the tension I could feel in their arm. No response. We found a flashlight in the kitchen and continued toward the utility room where the circuit breaker was located. The beam cut through the darkness, casting long shadows ahead of us. The utility room door stood open, Marlene's flashlight on the floor, its beam pointing at the wall. But no Marlene. Marlene! Jamie called again, more urgently. The back door beside the utility room was ajar, rain blowing in from the storm. Janie picked up Marlene's flashlight. She wouldn't have gone outside, not after dark. Maybe she didn't have a choice, I said grimly. We approached the open door cautiously. Beyond it, rain pelted the yard, illuminated periodically by flashes of lightning. In one such flash, I caught a glimpse of something at the edge of the property. A figure, standing perfectly still beneath an oak tree. There, I pointed. Jamie followed my gaze. I don't see anything. Another flash of lightning, and the figure was closer, much closer. Now I could make out details. A woman's shape, but moving wrong. Legs and arms at unnatural angles. Call to her, the figure said in Marlene's voice, though its mouth didn't move. Tell her it's safe to come out. Inside, Jamie hissed, pulling me back. Now. We retreated, slamming the door and throwing the deadbolt. That's not Marlene, Jamie said unnecessarily as we backed away from the door. Then where is she? A thump from above made us both look up. Upstairs, Jamie whispered. She must have gone upstairs when the lights went out. We moved to the stairs, calling Marlene's name softly. No response, but another thump, like something heavy falling. At the top of the stairs, we found a hallway with 4 doors, all closed. One door at the far end had a strange, dark substance seeping beneath it. Marlene? Jamie called again, voice cracking slightly. My radio spike was slick with sweat in my palm as we approached the door. Jamie counted silently. 1, 2, 3. Then threw it open. The room beyond was empty, save for a bed and dresser. The window was open, curtains billowing in the wind, rain pouring in and pooling on the hardwood floor. That was the dark substance we'd seen. Just rainwater. As Jamie moved to close the window, I caught movement in my peripheral vision. Turning, I saw Marlene standing in the hallway behind us, soaking wet, her clothing plastered to her body. "Thank God," I breathed. "Where were you?" She didn't respond, just stared at us with an unnerving stillness. "Marlene?" Jamie said cautiously. "You okay?" Still no response. Jamie stepped toward her slowly. "Marlene, say something." A smile spread across her face, too wide, stretching beyond the natural limits of her mouth. "Rule number 4, she finally said, her voice wrong somehow, as if she was practicing using it. "If you see someone you know, do not acknowledge them unless they speak first." Jamie froze. "That's not Marlene." The thing wearing Marlene's face tilted its head at an impossible angle. "Too late now," it said. "You've already seen me." "Run!" Jamie shoved me back toward the stairs, placing their body between me and the thing wearing Marlene's face. The creature tilted its head further, neck bending at an angle that would snap human vertebrae. Its smile stretched impossibly wider. "Jamie Blackfox," it said, voice modulating between Marlene's familiar tones and something deeper, raspier. "Last of the Black Fox line, how your grandmother would weep to see you now." Jamie faltered, just for a second, and that was all it took. The creature lunged, movements jerky and too fast, like watching footage with frames missing. One moment it was at the end of the hallway, the next, it was on Jamie. I swung the railroad spike without thinking, connecting with the creature's shoulder. It made a sound. Not a scream, but a high-pitched keening that hurt my ears. It recoiled, and I saw where the spike had touched it. The flesh sizzled and bubbled like wax held too close to a flame. "Down the stairs," Jamie gasped, pushing me ahead. We tumbled down the staircase, Jamie slamming the door at the top behind us. Something heavy hit the other side immediately. "That won't hold it long," Jamie panted. "We need to find Marlene." "How do we know she's not?" I couldn't finish the thought. "If it's wearing her face upstairs, the real Marlene is somewhere else," Jamie insisted, moving toward the kitchen. "We need weapons. Ironworks, you saw that." The pounding at the upstairs door grew more insistent. Wood splintered. In the kitchen, Jamie pulled open a drawer and removed a cast iron skillet and several large knives. They handed me the skillet and took a knife for themselves. "If it touches you, you're done," Jamie warned. "One touch is all it takes for it to start absorbing you." "I thought it already had my face," I said, confused. "It has your image, from watching you. But it doesn't have your essence yet." The upstairs door shattered with a final crash. We could hear it moving on the landing. "Marlene!" Jamie called out, voice low but urgent. "If you can hear us, make a sound." A faint thumping came from a door beside the refrigerator, a pantry or closet of some kind. Jamie rushed to it, finding it locked from the outside. They slid the bolt and pulled the door open. Marlene tumbled out, bound and gagged, her eyes wide with terror. Jamie quickly removed the gag while I worked on the zip ties binding her wrists. "It came through the back door," she gasped as soon as she could speak. "Looked like you, Agent Chen. Said you'd found something outside." So it had been mimicking me already. "We need to get out of here," I said, helping Marlene to her feet. "The truck," Jamie agreed. "If we can make it to the truck." The lights suddenly flashed back on, momentarily blinding us. When my vision cleared, I saw it standing in the kitchen doorway. It no longer looked entirely like Marlene. Her face seemed to be melting, revealing something else underneath. Features that resembled mine, but wrong. like a child's attempt at sculpting a face from clay. "3 birds in one nest," it said, its voice a nauseating blend of Marlene's, mine, and others I didn't recognize. How efficient. Jamie pushed both of us behind them. Where's the real Marlene? The creature's distorted face registered confusion. What? A noise from the pantry doorway made us all turn. Another Marlene stood there, identical to the one we'd just freed. "Oh God," I breathed. The Marlene behind us gripped my arm painfully. "That's not me," she hissed. "That's it." The Marlene in the pantry doorway said exactly the same thing at exactly the same time, with exactly the same inflection. Jamie looked between them, knife raised uncertainly. "Jamie," both Marlenes said simultaneously, "you've known me for 20 years. It's me." I clutched the iron skillet, feeling utterly out of my depth. The creature in the kitchen doorway watched with grotesque fascination, its half-formed face twisting into what might have been amusement. "Such entertainment," it said. "Choose, Jamie Black Fox. Which one lives? Which one dies?" Jamie's eyes darted between the 2 identical women. "Neither of you move," they commanded. "The iron," I suggested, remembering the creature's reaction upstairs. "If iron burns it—" Before I could finish, the Marlene behind me shoved me hard toward the creature in the doorway. I stumbled, barely keeping my feet, the skillet clattering to the floor. "It's her!" the Marlene behind me shrieked, pointing at the one in the pantry doorway. "She's the monster!" The Marlene in the pantry doorway remained absolutely still, her eyes fixed on Jamie. "Rule number 5, she said quietly. "Iron." Jamie didn't hesitate. They lunged toward the Marlene who had pushed me, pressing the blade of the iron knife against her cheek. The effect was immediate and horrifying. Her skin bubbled and smoked where the iron touched, and her scream wasn't human, a sound like metal scraping metal, amplified beyond bearing. "Run!" the real Marlene shouted, grabbing my arm and pulling me toward the front door. The creature recovered quickly, knocking Jamie aside with inhuman strength. As we fled through the living room, I glanced back to see its face rippling, features swimming beneath the surface of what looked like skin, but clearly wasn't. We burst out the front door into the storm, rain immediately drenching us. Jamie's truck sat in the driveway, our only hope of escape. "Keys!" I shouted over the thunder. Jamie patted their pockets frantically, then cursed. Inside, on the table. The front door slammed open behind us. The creature stood there, now barely resembling anything human. Its limbs were too long, joints bending in multiple places they shouldn't. What had been Marlene's face was now a grotesque approximation of human features, constantly shifting between different appearances like a living hologram. "The shed," Marlene pointed to a small outbuilding at the edge of the property. "There's another way." We sprinted through the downpour, feet slipping in the mud. Behind us, the creature followed, not running, but moving in a disjointed, spider-like gait that somehow covered ground faster than should have been possible. The shed door stuck from the rain, but Jamie's shoulder against it popped it open. Inside was a cramped space, filled with gardening tools, boxes, and, miraculously, an old pickup truck. "My husband's," Marlene explained, climbing into the driver's seat. "Haven't driven it in years, but it should start." "Should?" I glanced back at the open door where the creature's elongated shadow now stretched across the ground. Marlene turned the key. The engine coughed, groaned, then roared to life. "Get in!" Jamie and I piled into the passenger side as the creature reached the shed door. Its form seemed to ripple and compress as it ducked to enter the small space. "Hold on," Marlene warned, throwing the truck into reverse. We shot backward, crashing through the wooden shed wall in an explosion of splinters and nails. I caught a glimpse of the creature as we pulled away. It stood amid the wreckage, its body contorting in ways that made my eyes hurt to look at, face cycling rapidly through different human appearances, like a grotesque slideshow. Marlene spun the wheel, tires finding purchase in the muddy yard, and we fishtailed onto the long driveway. Rain lashed against the windshield, the wipers barely keeping up. "Where are we going?" I shouted over the roar of the engine in storm. "Town," Jamie answered. "Rule number 2, back to town before dark." "It's already dark." "Then we need somewhere safe," Marlene said grimly. "Somewhere with iron. Lots of it." "The old railroad depot," Jamie suggested. "Steel tracks, iron fixtures, everywhere." Marlene nodded and took a sharp turn onto the main road, the truck swaying dangerously. I twisted in my seat to look behind us, half expecting to see the creature in pursuit. The road was empty, but that did little to calm my nerves. "It let us go," I realized aloud. "Why would it let us go?" Jamie and Marlene exchanged glances. "It's not done playing," Jamie said darkly. We drove in tense silence, the storm battering the old truck. Twice, Marlene had to slow almost to a stop when the rain became too heavy to see through. Each time, my heart hammered with the certainty that the creature would appear out of the darkness. "Tell me about Rule 8, I said finally, needing to break the silence, to understand. "It knows your face now. What does that mean exactly?" Marlene kept her eyes on the road. "It means once it's seen you, learned you, it can find you anywhere. Your appearance, your voice, your mannerisms, they're all part of it now. So, those texts I got, the photo of me in the motel room. It's already wearing your face sometimes," Jamie confirmed. "Becoming you when it's useful. But it doesn't have your essence yet," Marlene added. "It hasn't touched you, hasn't absorbed you." The implications were horrifying. "So right now, there could be another me walking around?" "Possibly," Jamie said, "but it can't maintain a form indefinitely without fully absorbing the original. It needs completion. It needs to kill me," I translated. Neither of them contradicted me. The railroad depot loomed ahead, an imposing brick structure from the early 1900s. Long abandoned, but still solid. Marlene parked as close to the entrance as possible. "Stay together," she warned as we made a dash through the rain to the boarded-up door. Jamie produced a pocket knife and worked on the padlock, securing a chain around the door handles. After a minute of tense effort, the lock gave way. Inside, the depot was a cavernous space, empty except for a few ancient wooden benches and a ticket counter. Dust and debris covered the floor, and the air smelled of rust and abandonment. But most importantly, it was dry and seemingly unoccupied. Marlene found an old lantern in what had once been an office and, amazingly, got it lit. The warm glow pushed back the darkness, creating a small circle of light in the vast room. "We should be safe here until morning," she said, but her tone lacked conviction. I sank onto one of the wooden benches, exhaustion suddenly hitting me like a physical force. "What happens in the morning?" "We go back to the beginning," Jamie said, pacing the perimeter of our light circle. "Timothy Grayson's campsite. That's where it first appeared, where it would have been weakest. And we find something to kill it with," I added. Marlene shook her head. "You don't understand. This thing, it's ancient. Killing it isn't simple. You mentioned fire," I recalled, "or catching it between forms. Theories," she dismissed. "Stories. But the iron hurts it," I insisted. "That gives us something." Jamie stopped pacing and joined me on the bench. "Iron disrupts its energy, yes, but hurting it isn't killing it. A strange smell drifted through the depot, faint at first, then stronger, like hair burning. Rule number 7. If you smell burning hair, leave immediately. We all noticed it at the same time, freezing in place. It found us, Marlene whispered. The small circle of lantern light suddenly seemed very fragile against the vast darkness of the depot. Outside, the storm raged, lightning illuminating the tall windows in strobing flashes. And in one such flash, I saw them. Dozens of silhouettes surrounding the building. Human-shaped but not moving like humans. Their limbs too fluid, heads cocked at impossible angles. All perfectly still, all watching. It's not just one, I realized with dawning horror. It's many. Or it's one that can be many, Jamie said softly. Parts of itself, spreading, infecting. Marlene clutched her medicine pouch. We need a plan. Fast. Another flash of lightning, and the silhouettes were closer to the windows. The smell of burning hair grew stronger. The tracks, Jamie decided. The old rail yard behind the depot. If we can get there, we'd be in the open, I objected. But surrounded by iron, Marlene understood. It's our best chance. The rational part of my brain, the FBI agent who believed in evidence and procedure, was screaming that this was madness. But that part was getting quieter by the hour, drowned out by the reality of what I'd seen. We gathered close, preparing to make a run for the back exit and the rail yard beyond. I gripped the cast iron skillet we'd brought from Marlene's house, while Janie clutched their iron knife. Marlene held the lantern, our pitiful light against the gathering darkness. On 3, Jamie whispered. 1.2. The lantern went out, plunging us into absolute darkness. 3, came Jamie's voice, suddenly much closer to my ear than it should have been. Run, Agent Chen. See if you can outrun your own face. I swung the skillet blindly toward the voice, connecting with something solid. A hiss of pain told me I'd hit my target. Marcus, it's me. Jamie's voice came from a different direction now, behind me. Don't trust it, Marlene warned from somewhere to my left. Remember rule number 3. If you hear your name called in the woods, do not answer. We weren't in woods, but the principle applied. I remained silent, backing away from where I'd heard the voice, skillet raised defensively. Lightning flashed, illuminating the depot interior for a split second. In that instant, I saw 3 Jamies, one nursing a wounded arm where I'd struck it, one near Marlene, and one by the back exit. All looked identical. All wore the same expression of alarm. Darkness swallowed the scene again. Marlene, to me, I called, deciding to take initiative. Head for the back door. How do I know it's really you? Her voice quavered. Good question. How could any of us prove our identities? The spike, I remembered. When I hit the creature with the railroad spike upstairs, it burned it. Iron burns it. Another flash of lightning. The Jamie had struck was gone. The one near Marlene had moved closer to her, hand outstretched. The third remained by the exit. Jamie? Marlene called uncertainly. Press your knife against your arm. If you're really you, it won't burn. That's not how this works. The Jamie beside her protested. I'm human. Iron burns humans too if you press hard enough. Just a touch, I insisted, moving slowly toward them. Just prove it's you. The Jamie by the exit stepped forward. Like this, they said, touching the knife blade lightly to the back of their hand. Nothing happened. The Jamie beside Marlene hesitated. You know me, Marlene, they said softly. We've been friends for 20 years. Your husband carved my bow when I was 12. You taught me how to make your grandmother's fry bread. Personal details, knowledge. but the creature had shown it could access memories of those it mimicked. I continued my approach, skillet ready. "Touch the knife to your skin," I repeated. "Now." Another lightning flash, and in that instant, Marlene shoved her medicine pouch against the face of the Jamie beside her. A horrific sizzling sound filled the air, followed by an inhuman shriek. The creature's form rippled, Jamie's features melting away to reveal that same terrible blankness. A face that was trying to be a face but couldn't quite manage it. "Run!" the real Jamie shouted from the exit. Marlene broke away as the creature thrashed, its limbs elongating, contorting. I swung the skillet at it again, connecting with what might have been a shoulder. It recoiled, giving us the opening we needed. We sprinted for the exit, where Jamie held the door open. Outside, the storm had intensified, rain coming down in blinding sheets. Lightning strobed constantly now, revealing the rail yard, a maze of rusted tracks, abandoned cargo cars, and switching equipment. This way. Jamie led us toward a cluster of old boxcars. Behind us, the creature, or creatures, emerged from the depot. Not one, not three, but at least a dozen forms, all moving with that same wrong fluidity, like animations missing frames. Some still wore Jamie's face, others had mine, Marlene's, faces I didn't recognize, and some had no discernible features at all. "What the hell are those?" I gasped as we ran. "It's fragmenting," Marlene panted, splitting itself to corner us. We reached the first boxcar, rusted, covered in graffiti, door partially open. Jamie heaved it wider, and we tumbled inside, just as the nearest creature reached the tracks surrounding the train. It stepped onto the iron rail and immediately recoiled with a screech, its foot smoking where it had made contact. "It can't cross the rails," Jamie realized. "Not directly," Marlene qualified, pointing to where other forms were searching for gaps in the tracks, places where they could slip through without touching iron. The interior of the boxcar was empty except for debris and the remnants of a homeless camp. Old blankets, empty cans, a shopping cart. Rain pounded on the metal roof, creating a deafening din. "We're trapped," I said, the reality of our situation sinking in. "Temporarily safe," Jamie corrected, peering out through a gap in the rusted wall. "They can't cross the tracks easily, but they'll find a way eventually." "So what's the plan?" I demanded. "Wait for dawn? Then what?" Neither of them answered immediately. Outside, lightning continued to flash, illuminating the grotesque forms circling our position, testing different approaches, looking for weaknesses. "We need to get back to my truck," Jamie finally said. "It's our only way out of here." "Through all of those?" I gestured at the creatures surrounding us. "No." Marlene shook her head. "Under them." She moved to the floor of the boxcar and began pulling up rotted boards, revealing the gravel rail bed beneath. "The drainage tunnels," she explained. "This whole yard was built with tunnels underneath to prevent flooding. They connect to the old maintenance shed about a quarter-mile east." "How do you know this?" I asked, helping her pull up more boards. "My father worked for the railroad," she said, "and I used to play here as a kid before they fenced it off. The tunnels were our secret clubhouse." Jamie joined us, and soon we had created an opening large enough to slip through. Below was a drop of about 6 feet to a concrete culvert partially filled with rushing rainwater. "I'll go first," Jamie volunteered, lowering themselves through the hole and dropping into the shallow water below. They looked up at us. "It's safe. Hurry." Marlene went next. As I prepared to follow, a loud bang came from the boxcar door. Something was trying to force its way in. The door, which we'd secured with a piece of rebar, shuddered under the impact. I didn't hesitate any longer, sliding feet first into the hole and dropping into the cold water below. It came up to my knees, chilling me instantly. "This way," Marlene whispered, already sloshing eastward through the narrow tunnel. We followed, hunched over to avoid hitting our heads on the low ceiling. The tunnel was claustrophobic, barely large enough for an adult to navigate. Every few yards, metal support beams crossed overhead. Iron, I noted with relief. If the creatures couldn't cross iron rails, perhaps these beams would keep them from following us through the ceiling. We moved as quickly as the rushing water and limited visibility would allow. My FBI training had covered many scenarios, but crawling through flooded drainage tunnels pursued by shape-shifting entities hadn't been on the curriculum. "Stop!" Jamie hissed suddenly. "Listen!" We froze, and in the relative quiet beneath the thunder above, I heard it. Splashing sounds behind us. Something was in the tunnel. "Move!" Marlene urged. "Maintenance shed is just ahead." The tunnel widened slightly as we approached a junction where several culverts met in a circular chamber. Dim light filtered down from a grate above, offering momentary relief from the absolute darkness. That's when I saw it. A shape in the water behind us, moving fast. Not splashing like a person would, but gliding, as if the water itself was being manipulated. "Run!" I shouted, abandoning any pretense of stealth. We sloshed forward desperately, taking the eastern passage as Marlene directed. The splashing behind us accelerated. "There!" Marlene pointed ahead to where a rusty ladder led up to what must be the maintenance shed. Jamie reached it first and scrambled up, pushing at the hatch above. "It's stuck," I glanced back. The thing in the water was closer now, a dark, writhing mass that seemed to be composed of multiple forms merged together, a hideous amalgamation of all the faces it had stolen. "Together," I called to Jamie, joining them on the ladder. We pushed at the hatch simultaneously, muscles straining. With a grinding screech, it began to move. "Marlene, come on!" Jamie reached down to her. She had stopped several feet from the ladder, staring at the approaching entity. "Get it open first," she called. "I'll hold it off." Before we could protest, she pulled something from her pocket, a small leather pouch similar to the one she'd pressed against the false Jamie in the depot. She ripped it open and scattered its contents into the water around her. The effect was immediate and startling. Where the herbs and bones hit the water, it sizzled and steamed. The creature's advance halted, its mass rippling in apparent pain or confusion. "Now!" she shouted. We redoubled our efforts on the hatch, and with a final heave, it burst open. Rain and fresh air poured in as we climbed out into what was indeed an old maintenance shed, little more than a corrugated metal roof over a concrete pad, open on one side. "Marlene," Jamie called down. "Come on." She turned and splashed toward the ladder, but the creature had already begun to move again, flowing around the treated water. One elongated limb shot out, wrapping around her ankle. She screamed as her leg began to smoke where it was touched, not from heat, but from some kind of reaction between her flesh and the creature's substance. I grabbed the iron skillet I'd somehow managed to keep hold of throughout our escape and lowered it through the hatch, striking at the appendage holding Marlene. It released her with a sound like tearing fabric, and she scrambled up the ladder and through the hatch. We slammed it shut behind her, Jamie dragging a heavy piece of machinery over to secure it. Marlene collapsed on the concrete, her ankle a mess of blistered skin where the creature had grabbed her. "We need to get that treated," I said, kneeling beside her. "No time," she gasped. "It won't stop it for long. We need to move." Outside the shelter, the rail yard stretched before us, and beyond it, the lights of Noble glimmered through the rain. We were closer to town than I'd realized. "Rule number 2, Jamie said. Back to town before dark." "A little late for that?" I pointed out grimly. Better late than never. Marlene grimaced as she struggled to her feet. We supported her between us as we made our way across the rail yard toward the fence that separated it from the town proper. Behind us, metallic banging sounds indicated the creature was already attempting to follow. What happens when we reach town? I asked. We can't leave this thing to civilians. The church, Marlene said between pained breaths. St. Michael's, iron fence, iron fixtures, consecrated ground. You think that will stop it? I think it's our best chance to survive until dawn, she replied. The fence loomed ahead, chain link topped with barbed wire. A significant obstacle for two exhausted people supporting an injured third. There. Jamie pointed to a section that had been cut and bent back, evidence of previous trespassers. As we reached the gap, I turned for one last look at the rail yard. Lightning flashed, and I saw them, not just one or two, but dozens of misshapen forms emerging from various points around the maintenance shed, all moving with that same wrong fluidity, all coming for us. But most disturbing of all was the one in the lead, a perfect copy of me, down to the mud-stained suit and determined expression. The only difference was its eyes, empty, flat, like painted glass. It raised a hand in what might have been a mocking wave. "My face," I whispered. "It's wearing my face." We squeezed through the fence and half-carried Marlene across the empty road. The storm had driven everyone indoors. Noble's streets were deserted, glistening wet under the streetlights. Marlene's breathing was becoming more labored, her skin burning hot despite the cold rain. "Something's wrong," I said as we paused under the awning of a closed hardware store. "She's getting worse." Jamie examined her ankle in the dim light. The blistered area had spread, angry red tendrils extending up her calf. "It's infecting her," Jamie said grimly, "trying to take her over." "Like the others? Ellis, Cruz, Harmon?" "Yes, but slower. The medicine pouch slowed the process." Jamie looked at me, fear evident in their eyes. "We need to get her to St. Michael's. Fast." I glanced behind us. The street remained empty, but I could feel eyes watching from the darkness between buildings, from the storm drains, from everywhere. "How far?" I asked. 3 blocks, on Main Street." I nodded, and we continued on, Marlene becoming increasingly delirious between us. "Cold," she mumbled. "So cold inside." "Stay with us, Marlene," I urged. "Just a little further." "Should leave me," she slurred. "I'm compromised." "Not happening," Jamie said firmly. We turned onto Main Street, and I saw it ahead. St. Michael's Catholic Church, a modest brick building with a small steeple and, as promised, an iron fence surrounding it. Light glowed softly through stained glass windows despite the late hour. "Almost there," I encouraged Marlene, who was now barely supporting her own weight. The sound of a vehicle approaching made us pause in the shadows. A police cruiser rolled slowly down the wet street, spotlight sweeping the sidewalks. "Help?" I suggested. Jamie shook their head vehemently. "Number we don't know." The implication was clear. We couldn't be sure who was still human. The cruiser slowed as the spotlight found us huddled in the doorway. A voice came over the loudspeaker. "FBI Agent Chen, we've been looking for you." My blood ran cold. It was Sheriff Wilkins's voice. "Stay where you are. We're here to help." Jamie and I exchanged glances. Could it really be Wilkins? Or was it the creature using his voice, his face? The cruiser stopped and the driver's door opened. Sheriff Wilkins stepped out, hand resting casually on his holstered sidearm. "You folks want to tell me what you're doing out in this storm?" he called, approaching slowly. "Got reports of break-ins at the old depot and maintenance shed. Funny coincidence finding you 3 nearby." I shifted, blocking Marlene from his view as much as possible. "Sheriff," I addressed him cautiously. "We need to get to the church. Marlene's injured." He frowned, moving closer. "Injured how?" I tensed, realizing I had no way to be sure this was really Wilkins. "Rule number 4. If you see someone you know on a rural road, do not acknowledge them unless they speak first." But we weren't on a rural road. We were in town, and he had spoken first. Still, caution seemed wise. "Sheriff, do you remember what you gave me when I arrived in town?" Wilkins paused. "A notebook. Deputy Harmon's notebook. Blood on the cover." That checked out, but the creature could have that knowledge if it had access to Wilkins's memories. "Do you have any iron on you, Sheriff?" Jamie asked bluntly. Wilkins's eyebrows shot up. "Iron? What the hell are you talking about, Black Fox?" "Please, Sheriff," I pressed. "It's important." He stared at us for a long moment, then slowly reached into his pocket and pulled out a set of handcuffs. Steel and nickel, not iron, but close enough for whatever test you're running. He held the cuffs against his bare wrist. Nothing happened. Jamie and I exhaled in unison. "We need to get to the church," I explained quickly. "Marlene's been infected. Something's happening to her." Wilkins's eyes widened as he finally got a good look at Marlene's condition. Her eyes were glassy, skin waxy, the veins in her neck and face darkening visibly. "Jesus Christ," he breathed, "like the others." "You know?" Jamie asked. "I've lived here my whole life," Wilkins said grimly. "I know what's in these woods. Come on, I'll drive you." He helped us get Marlene into the back of the cruiser, then sped the short distance to St. Michael's, pulling right up to the gate. As we carried Marlene through the iron gate, I felt her stiffen suddenly, a tremor running through her body. "Hurry," Jamie urged. The church door opened as we approached. An older priest stood in the doorway, concern etched on his weathered face. "Father Martinez," Sheriff Wilkins called. "We need sanctuary." The priest's eyes widened at the sight of Marlene, but he quickly stepped aside to let us enter. "Bring her to the altar," he directed. The church interior was warm and dimly lit, candles flickering in red glass holders along the walls. We laid Marlene on the steps before the altar, where she immediately began to convulse. "What happened to her?" Father Martinez asked, kneeling beside her. "It touched her," Jamie explained. "It's trying to take her over." The priest crossed himself. "Nahulo," he whispered. "You know of it?" I asked, surprised. "I have been priest here for 30 years, he replied gravely. "In a town like Noble, a man of God learns about more than just what's in the Bible." He rose and moved quickly to a cabinet near the altar, returning with a small silver container. "Holy water blessed with prayers from multiple faiths," he explained. "And this." He held up a crude iron nail. "From the original church, built in 1907. I glanced at Jamie, who nodded encouragingly. "Do it," they said. Father Martinez began to pray in a mixture of Latin and what sounded like Cherokee, sprinkling the holy water over Marlene's convulsing form. Where the droplets touched her skin, steam rose. "Hold her," the priest instructed. Jamie and I pinned her thrashing limbs as best we could. The priest pressed the iron nail against the center of the infection on her ankle. Marlene's scream was inhuman, the same terrible sound the creature had made when touched with iron. Her back arched impossibly high, bones cracking with the strain. "Keep going," Jamie urged when the priest hesitated. He pressed the nail deeper, and something began to happen. A thick, black substance oozed from the wound, not blood, but something viscous and wrong, like oil mixed with tar. It pooled on the altar steps, quivering as if alive. "Contain it!" the priest shouted. Sheriff Wilkins grabbed a brass collection plate from a nearby table and scooped the substance into it. It writhed in the plate, trying to escape. Father Martinez quickly poured the remaining holy water over it. The substance hissed and bubbled, gradually dissolving into acrid smoke that smelled of burning hair. Rule number 7. Marlene went limp, her breathing shallow but steady. The dark veins receded from her face and neck, color returning slowly to her ashen features. "Will she be okay?" I asked. "The infection is contained," the priest said, looking exhausted. "But she needs rest and prayer." "We don't have time for either," Jamie said, moving to the church windows. "They'll be coming." Outside, the rain had finally stopped, but the darkness seemed deeper somehow, more complete. I joined Jamie at the window and felt my heart sink. They were out there, dozens of them standing motionless on the sidewalks, in the street, all facing the church. Some had recognizable human forms, including my doppelganger at the front, while others were twisted amalgamations of multiple features, like sculptures made by an artist with only a passing familiarity with human anatomy. "The iron fence will keep them out," Father Martinez assured us, though his voice lacked conviction. "For how long?" Sheriff Wilkins asked, checking his service weapon. "Until dawn?" "Dawn alone won't save us," Jamie said. "It weakens them, but they've grown too strong." I thought of the 4 dead officers, of Timothy Grayson, of Marlene's near transformation. There has to be a way to stop them permanently. Jamie was silent for a long moment. "There might be, but it's dangerous." "More dangerous than being surrounded by those things?" I gestured to the window. "Yes," Jamie said simply. "Because it would require one of us to be bait." "Bait?" "The original, Timothy Grayson. If we could find where it's keeping him, where it first manifested." "You think he's still alive?" I asked, incredulous. "Not alive as we understand it, but his essence, his original form. It would need to preserve that to maintain its ability to mimic him." "And you think destroying the original would kill the copies?" Sheriff Wilkins asked. "It might," Jamie admitted. "In the old stories, cutting off a skinwalker's power means finding where it hides its original form." "So where would that be?" I pressed. "The campsite," Jamie replied, "where Grayson disappeared, near Lake Thunderbird." Rule number 6. Never turn your back on Lake Thunderbird after dark. "Even if you're right," Sheriff Wilkins interjected, "how do we get there?" "Those things have us surrounded." Father Martinez cleared his throat. "There may be a way. The church has a tunnel." We all turned to stare at him. "During Prohibition," he explained, "the original priest here was sympathetic to those who enjoyed their spirits. The tunnel was used to smuggle alcohol. It leads to an old boathouse on the lake." "On Lake Thunderbird?" I asked. "But that's miles from here." "Not as the crow flies," the priest corrected. "The lake's eastern finger comes within half a mile of town." Hope flickered to life, and the tunnel is intact. "As far as I know, I've never used it myself, but it's part of church lore." "We'll need weapons," Sheriff Wilkins said, "if we're going after the source." "Iron," Jamie emphasized. "Nothing else will hurt them for long." The priest led us to a trap door hidden beneath a rug in his office. Rusty hinges protested as we lifted it, revealing stone steps descending into darkness. "I'll stay with Marlene," Father Martinez volunteered. "The church will remain sanctified as long as I'm here to maintain the prayers." I looked at Jamie and Sheriff Wilkins. "This is insane." "Welcome to Noble," Wilkins said dryly, checking his flashlight, "when you've eliminated the impossible." "Whatever remains is usually trying to kill you," Jamie finished with grim humor. We gathered what makeshift iron weapons we could find. An antique fireplace poker for me, a length of iron pipe for Jamie, while Sheriff Wilkins kept his gun, but accepted a handful of iron nails to add to his pockets. "Dawn's in about 4 hours," Wilkins noted, checking his watch. "If we're doing this, we should go now." I looked once more out the window at the gathering creatures. My doppelganger still stood at the front, its gaze seemingly fixed directly on me, despite the distance and darkness. As I watched, it smiled, a perfect imitation of my own smile, yet utterly wrong. "Let's go," I said, turning away from the window. "I'm ready to get my face back." We descended into the tunnel, leaving behind the safety of consecrated ground and stepping into the unknown darkness beneath Noble, Oklahoma. A darkness I now knew had been waiting for someone like me all along. They found what was left of Timothy Grayson in a cave behind a waterfall at the eastern edge of Lake Thunderbird. The official report I filed with the Bureau described the scene as a suspected cult ritual site with evidence of human remains. The report mentioned a confrontation with suspects that resulted in a fire, destroying most of the physical evidence. Sheriff Wilkins corroborated my account. What the report doesn't mention is how we found Grayson. Not dead, not alive, but suspended in a state between. His body had been hollowed out, preserved like a cocoon, his face intact, but his eyes empty. Or how, when we burned his remains with iron nails pressed into the ashes, all those creatures in town collapsed simultaneously, melting into the same black tar-like substance we'd extracted from Marlene. It doesn't mention how Jamie Blackfox knew exactly where to find the cave, as if guided by something beyond rational explanation, or how Sheriff Wilkins wept when we discovered deputies' crews and Harmon's badges arranged in a strange pattern around Grayson's remains. The report certainly doesn't mention that I occasionally catch glimpses of myself in mirrors or windows, smiling when I'm not smiling, eyes looking left when mine are focused straight ahead. Brief moments, gone so quickly I can almost convince myself I imagined them. Almost. Marlene recovered, physically at least. The Motel 6 housekeeper never returned to work. Father Martinez continues to maintain the sanctity of St. Michael's Church, and Jamie Blackfox still leads search parties through the woods of McLean County when hikers go missing. As for me, I requested a transfer back to Quantico. My supervisor was sympathetic, especially after the cult killings made national news. 4 law enforcement officers dead would rattle anyone. I live in Alexandria now, in an apartment with iron fixtures I installed myself. I keep Harmon's notebook in a fireproof safe, though I've memorized every rule. Rule 1, never investigate alone, but never bring more than one partner. Rule 2, always be back in town before sunset. Rule 3, if you hear your name called in the woods, do not answer. Rule 4, if you see someone you know on a rural road, do not acknowledge them unless they speak first. Rule 5, keep something iron on your person at all times. Rule 6, never turn your back on Lake Thunderbird after dark. Rule 7, if you smell burning hair, leave immediately. Rule 8, it knows your face now. That last rule haunts me the most. Because while we may have destroyed its physical anchor in Noble, I can't shake the feeling that a part of it escaped. A part wearing my face. Last week, my mother called from San Francisco, confused and frightened. A man had visited her, claiming to be me. He had my face, my voice, my FBI credentials. He asked detailed questions about my childhood, about our family history. When she became suspicious and asked about the scar on my shoulder from a childhood accident, he excused himself to the bathroom and never returned. I've added my own 9th rule to Harmon's list. Rule 9, it never truly dies. It only waits. Tomorrow I leave for Oklahoma again. Not Noble this time, but a small town called Sulphur, where 3 people have gone missing after reporting seeing someone who looked exactly like me, asking questions about local folklore. I've packed my railroad spike, and I've made arrangements with Jamie Blackfox to meet me there. We'll follow the rules, most of them anyway, but I know that sooner or later, I'll have to break rule number 1, because ultimately, this thing wearing my face isn't hunting strangers anymore. It's hunting me, and only one of us will get to keep this face in the end.